The feudal system is one of the largest spanning governmental systems within Crusader Kings 3. Chances are you are either doing a playthrough using it right now, or on a tribal character who will ultimately end up transitioning to feudal before the end of your campaign. But the lifeblood of the aforementioned system is the feudal contract. This is what controls the levy and tax contribution of your vassals across your realm. In today's video, we're going to do a deep dive on the feudal contract. This is a supplemental video to our video on how to manage vassals, linked in the upper right corner. We'll be discussing some quick facts about feudal contracts that you might not know initially, then discuss all of the many feudal rights you can offer your vassal, and conclude our video talking about the special feudal contract options that are unlocked via innovations. If you'd like to jump to any relevant portion of the video, you'll find chapters in the timeline and description below. And as always, if you decide to pick the game up after watching this, please feel free to use my link in the description. You'll simply receive a Steam key that you'll go ahead and place directly into Steam while helping to support the channel. Currently, there is a 12% discount, and I'm not sure how much longer that will be going on, but let's get started on breaking down the feudal contract in Crusader Kings 3. We're back in the Kingdom of Sicily for this video because it lines up well with our vassal video, but let's talk a little bit about some things about feudal contracts that you might not otherwise have known before jumping into their kind of nuance. Now, your feudal contract obviously is right here, right? And you can see it when we look at our vassals list by just kind of scrolling down. Well, we also have a number of other things that we can kind of look at to get a really good contextual tip on how our feudal contract is going to go. For one, let's take a look at Prince Pandolf here. He has this little symbol right there, and that means that the feudal contract has been changed either by myself or by the vassal, because the vassal has used a hook to manipulate either lower taxes or levies or specific right, so on and so forth. So if you see the feudal contract has been changed and you didn't change it, you can jump here to take a look that maybe you accidentally missed a notification saying that a vassal used a hook against you to do so. Also, we get this little tip right here. Levies and taxes are reduced as you are not Prince Pandolf's rightful liege. So the way that this works is there's two different modifiers. It's either going to be a 50% penalty or a 25% penalty. So I'm going to hover over taxes, I'm going to hover over contribution, and we're going to see that I'm not the rightful liege, so it's a 50% penalty. And this is because I am a king and he is a duke. There's one distance between our rank, like there's just one step between our ranks. Now, if this was a count, this would be a 25% difference. Take a look at Count William of Foggia here. Yeah, it says times 0.75, so it's a 25% penalty. So basically it'll drop by 25% for that additional jump. Now you're probably thinking, what if I'm an emperor? Well, the emperor title is exempt from the penalty. So a duke whose liege holds the de jure title or empire title are exempt from the penalty. So it's quite nice. I said de jure, I know it's de jure, I'm so sorry. But those are two really big things I wanted to go over real quick because they're important. Another thing that, I didn't even know until I started to do this video and I really looked around for it. Hover over any flag of any vassal, and yes, you get their feudal, their duchy rank realm, their ruler, their military strength, but this is so important. Their succession law. This is where you're going to find out if it's a male preference, if it's, what's the other one? It's like male preference and male only, or any one of these different gender laws. But this is important because it's going to play into some of the rights we're going to discuss in the actual feudal contract section. But it also can tell us here that it's a partition, right? But if I look over here, this is a Confederate partition, and this will play, like I said, very well into a specific right we're going to go into. And I did want to talk about that because I couldn't find it for the longest time, and it is important to know how your vassal's land is going to be split up when they get too old and their heir takes over. You can kind of plan how this is going to influence your realm. In addition to that, you've got your feudal contract, right? And let's take a look at who's knocking on death's door in my realm. Looks like everyone's pretty good. Johnson's probably the closest one. Well, this feudal contract, let me just bring it up real quick. Let's just say he had high or extortionate taxes and levies, and all of these check boxes checked. Well, when he dies, his feudal contract is hereditary. It will pass on to his heir. That is an important thing to know because you probably have been playing in your game and you've had your vassal get a hook on you, and he's used that hook to force himself onto the council. That is different. Unless you absolutely see this checked, council rights guaranteed, your vassal that has forced himself onto your council is there for 20 years or until they die. So if you've gotten that unfortunate circumstance and you've gotten a very terrible counselor because the vassal used a hook against you, it's worth noting that is not a hereditary situation. That's not going to pass on to their heir. As soon as they die, they lose that. And real quick note too on hooks is the ability to influence those feudal contracts using hooks. Now you've got two types of hooks, right? You've got weak hooks, and then you've got strong hooks. Now, the difference mainly between weak and strong is what you can ultimately do with the strong hook versus the weak hook. Like, say, a strong hook allows you to put someone into a murder scheme, but that can be reserved for an intrigue-based video. But as far as the actual contract itself, strong hook regenerates itself, and you can use it multiple times. But both hooks allow you to influence and change a feudal contract in a way that would otherwise incur tyranny and allows you to absolve that tyranny. So let me jump over to here, William of Foggia. If I wanted to put extortionate on him, well, I'm going to incur tyranny for doing so. I'll use this hook and voila, no tyranny. But if I want to do two negative things, I have to counteract it with a positive thing. And even then, that's not going to really absolve the tyranny. So you have to kind of try and use these hooks in ways that make sense because you have to outweigh the negative things that are being done to your vassal. And you do that by granting them positive things to kind of balance out the amount of tyranny you're giving them, or use a hook. So now that we've gone into all these kind of quick little facts on the feudal contract, let's talk about the feudal contract itself. The feudal contract can be kind of a tricky thing, so we'll go through each individual piece of it, starting with the taxes and the levies. And you've got 5 total stages of tax or levy that you can impart upon your vassal. And as you hover over here, you'll get the information of what this overall includes, right? So tax exempt is obviously 0% taxes, and it gives +10 to the opinion with the vassal. As we go to low, it's 2.7. Which is actually 2.5. I'm having some other influencers that are kicking in with +5 to the opinion. This is going to be 10% taxes. And I'm going to explain what's influencing those numbers in just a second here. And also, it's going to have no effect on your current vassal opinion. High is going to increase the taxes up to 15%, and then extortionate puts it at 25%. We're probably wondering, hey, I said 25%. Why does that say 27.5? Well, there's one other big element about these taxes that isn't so transparent, or maybe it's just kind of tricky to understand. When you take a look at your crown authority between high or absolute, you can notice that both have vassal and levy contribution and then plus percentage. This is not an increase on, say, like, okay, they're not going to have a base of a 30% tax contribution, say for example on absolute 35% tax contribution. It's saying that for each tax or levy level, it's going to increase the amount that they will contribute by 35 or 10% respectively, depending on the crown authority. So again, for example, I am at high crown authority. My feudal tax contribution is +10%. Normal taxes, which would be 10%. 10% of 10% is 1%. That is now 11% taxes. So hopefully that makes a little sense. I know that when I first took a look at it, I was like, why does this confuse me so much? But moving on to levies, this is going to be a very similar scale. So 0%, 10%, 25%. And just so we're clear here, it's that bottom number here. It kind of, I don't know why it's not the top right there. So 25% right there. And then that's going to be 35%, and then this will be 50%. So this has a little bit higher of a jump between high and massive, but it's important to understand how this is influenced by your crown authority, because it can actually increase the amount of tax or levies that you get. But outside of that, we also have our individual rights that you can influence with each and every feudal contract, and they all depend, right? So we'll go through special contracts at the end of the video, but starting here at the beginning, we get coinage, which is going to grant me, the liege, a -2% to development growth, but it increases growth in the realm capital of my vassal by 0.3 a month. This is nice if I say I already have a lot of my stuff built up, my vassal is of my culture, and I want to increase the amount of growth across my nation to help out with my innovation speed or my taxes and levy contribution. You can use this, that when you're kind of already top-ended with your development, pass this out to a lower end development vassal to help increase that. Succession rights is interesting. Now remember what I talked about before about how to find succession rights with your vassals? Anytime you see their flag, you hover over it and you'll get that information. But I can see here that Duke Hamlin is of a male preference partition succession law. If I click this, it's going to force him to stay at partition, so he can't go to high partition or anything else of the sort. Taking a look at our succession laws real quick for that, he can't progress beyond this point. So this is important to know because this way you know exactly how your vassals are going to pretty much pass down their kingdom to their heirs. War declaration, essentially, and it's important to note too, with forced partition, it does influence the vassal, right? This is a -5 for the vassal opinion, whereas war declaration increases the vassal opinion by 5 because this is a positive special right you are granting to your vassal versus succession right, which is it's kind of like curtailing their power and keeping them kind of under the radar here. Also, they have to pay more prestige to change the law. It's important. I forgot to talk about that. Coinage, for example, it doesn't have any effect, even though it is a positive one. So it's worth noting that if you do something like this, but you give them war declaration, see how it absolves the tyranny. We'll go over that more in a little bit. But war declaration will allow the vassal to declare war regardless of my crown authority. High crown authority prevents your vassals from going to war. It shuts down that ability for them. And this is nice if you want your vassal to expand, but you have to be careful. They might also expand into the lands of your other vassals and make themselves more powerful. For example, here, Duke Hamlin was actually the subject of an expansion that took out almost all of his territory and swapped his liege. He had to kind of fight it back and gain it for himself, because I thought, oh, I'll sanction him and it'll be fine. No, it's not just simply external conflicts. They will also do internal ones. They'll also pay 50% less to go to war if they so wish. Otherwise, they have to use a hook on you to allow them to go to war, depending on your crown authority. We also get council rights, which is a nice one here. This will give the opinion of the vassal +5. Powerful vassals, other than this one, will get -2 in opinion, and this allows the individual to essentially use the demand council position interaction that we talked about. So that demand council opinion interaction will place him onto the council for 20 years, unless you put him on there. So if you put him on there, he's fine. You're good. You're not going to be forced to keep him there for 20 years unless you take him off. He can use this without using a hook to force himself on there. So it can be a bit of a double-edged sword. So make sure anyone you give this to is someone you absolutely want on your council. An heir would be a good example of that. Title revocation is another one. This is going to increase the opinion of the vassal by +5, and the liege cannot revoke the vassal's titles. Pretty straightforward on this one. I think this is also another one you'd want to give out to someone you really trust, is a friend, is a best friend, is an heir, something that you're really not going to be touching because, hey, maybe they're one of your best counselors. So these are almost all of the special rights that we can go through. There are 2 more I do want to talk about real quick. But before we jump into that, I want to talk about how these can kind of influence each other and how you can use them as bargaining chips outside of using the actual hook. Like you kind of saw with war declaration. Let's say I want to increase the feudal taxes and the feudal levies of Duke Hamlin. Well, this is going to incur 40 tyranny, and it's going to knock down everyone's opinion of me. This is going to reduce his opinion by 30. But if I give him this, well, that's a positive one. And I'm going to also never going to revoke his title. Well, I've given him 2 positive things to now outweigh the 2 negative things. This allows me to use these special rights to balance out the tyranny that I would otherwise accrue without a hook. So if you don't have a hook and you really need to get more levies out of someone, well, you know what? He's also a really badass counselor. Well, I'm just going to make sure that he gets title revocation here. He's not going to ever be removed from being a duke or council rights if he's that badass counselor I was talking about. You've got plenty of options here. So these abilities, and I think actually, let me see this. Yeah, coinage does count. I wasn't sure if it would count because it doesn't give an actual opinion bonus to the vassal. So I wasn't sure if it was like a wash for them or if it was an actual positive. But outside of all these rights, there are two other ones. So I'm going to create a new vassal here real quick. We're just going to give it to someone who does not have, who is not Catholic. And we're going to actually use, here, we'll use the actual religion of this location. And it doesn't necessarily matter, but it's just part of the example here. So going to this vassal, modifying his feudal contract, we get another one in this in the mix here. It's called religious rights. So the vassal gets 5 opinion off of it, and he gains popular opinion +5 for the actual location he manages. So everyone gets a pretty increased opinion of that. And the liege cannot demand conversion of the vassal, and the liege cannot use convert faith in the county and the vassal's lands. So you can only use this on an individual who does not share your religion. Personally, I don't think I'd ever really use this unless I really wanted to keep a portion of my land separate religion-wise from me, but that can cause so many other issues that I almost always just assign someone who's the same religion as that parent county and then demand conversion to get them to convert that county. Here we are in Bohemia. So our other one is fortification rights. Now, some of these rights are granted by innovations, right? Fortification rights, coinage, those are 2 examples of situations that are not special contracts, but are contract rights that are granted, again, via the innovation. So for example, battlements allows us to do the fortification right feudal contract, and coinage unlocks the coinage rights feudal contract. So with fortification rights, you're kind of, it's an interesting one. I wouldn't do this one right out the gate. In fact, this is kind of a mid to late game right, because it looks like you're just simply going to take castle building construction costs +5%. That's not the case. The vassal will also get a reduction of 10% from the amount of taxes he will pay you. So if he's on normal, he's going to have that reduced down. You can see here in this situation, I am at crown authority, which would give me a positive 10%, but fortification would reduce that by negative 10%. So it's a very interesting situation. You can't just jump into fortification rights thinking it's simply going to increase the castle building construction cost. Other than that, it'll also make it so that the fort levels that your vassal controls, his castle holdings, increase by 1, and castle buildings and holding construction cost is reduced by 15% and by 50% respectively. So you would use this in an instance where you yourself have either all your castles built or your holdings are in good shape, although this really only affects your castle buildings, not your castle holdings, which are different. Let me show you. This is a castle holding. So that's a little bit different than building up a castle building. So keep that in mind. Construct this holding with a result in a mot. But going back here to this really quick. This is really good to use when you know you want to have your vassal build up their lands and increase their holdings, and also making more castles across their territory so that you get a little bit more fortification going on. This can really be a really good mid-game one when you know you're going to start to wanting to expand those castles across your land. So now we've gone through all of the base feudal contract stuff, discussing the rights and how they all are broken down. Let's go into those special contracts to conclude our video. Much like coinage and fortification rights, the special contracts are unlocked via special innovations. For example, March is unlocked by going here and by going to Burrs. That'll unlock our March feudal contract. Or if we jump into the high medieval era and we go to divine right, that'll unlock palatinate. So, and scutage for scutage. So these 3 contracts are very interesting because unlike the other ones, they influence things on a pretty wide scale. You're you're going to use these in situations that make the most sense for what they grant and what they penalize. So let's start with scutage. Maybe it's scutage, and I'm sorry if I mispronounced that. While subject to a scutage contract, the vassal will pay 50% more tax than their feudal taxes obligation dictates, while at the same time providing 75% fewer levies than what their feudal levies obligations dictate. So the nice thing here is that their men-at-arms maintenance is reduced, so they can have a much nicer army, because this number over here is going to be a smaller number. They're going to have a bigger army to themselves. They don't have to contribute as much to me. But as a result, I will then get more money from them. So if I've given a particular vassal war declaration, maybe it makes sense to staple scutage onto them, or I staple March onto them, our next special contract. So March is very similar to scutage, but it kind of has a little bit more of an expanse on it. So for one, it does reduce my taxes by 50% versus scutage, which increases my taxes by 50%. That's the big difference right out the gate. But it does not affect levies that this vassal contributes to me versus scutage, which does, minus 75%. Now, when I take a look at March contract, the vassal gets army gold maintenance minus 20%, controlled territory defender advantage plus 5, and then plus 20% for levy size, garrison size, and levy reinforcement rate. This, again, can go really well in conjunction with war declaration. If you really want this guy to be a powerhouse going to war, he's going to have larger levies to take advantage of, larger levy size, going to have less army maintenance on that, and he's going to be able to build up his garrisons a little bit more. So if you want a particularly militant vassal, sanctioned and March are a very good way to go. You can kind of offset this a little bit by making it so he has to contribute more levies to you as well. So use this as you see fit, I'd say. Then our last one here is Palatinate, and this one's very interesting. So this will give you, the liege, 5% monthly prestige, but it'll reduce tax and levies from the vassals by 20%, or the vassal that you appoint this special contract to. In addition, it's going to grant your vassal 20% more monthly prestige. All fellow vassals, he's going to have a 15 opinion of, and hostile scheme success chance and personal scheme success chance is going to increase by 10. So this one is a little scary. I'm not going to lie with you. I don't like this one a lot. I think maybe this one is good if you're trying to keep a vassal from going to war with other vassals. But remember, he also gets a bonus to his hostile and personal scheme success chances. So if he's got a particularly high amount of intrigue and his traits or character disposition kind of has that inclination towards skullduggery, I would be a little worried about this one. So I wouldn't go crazy with Palatinate. In fact, this is the only special contract where I've looked at many times and go, no, I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that right now at all. March, I think, is the most valuable special contract, and I think scutage really works if you know you don't want to take levies from a specific vassal. Maybe you've built up that land for that vassal in the sense that it's mainly hinged on taxes. Well, go with scutage then, because the way that works is you're going to be getting a ton more taxes. You're going to be getting 50% more taxes from that vassal, in addition that you can just jump up on high or extortionate taxes. Remember, this is not 50% base. You are increasing the tax amount, which normally would have been 11, by 5.5%. And it's the same thing here. The levies, which is reduced by 75%, it's a minus 20%. So when I hover over this number would be reduced because of scutage or March or increased however it is. So when I say 75 and 50%, you have to think of it as increasing the amount that's coming to you versus just a flat base number. And I think that's where a little bit of confusion can reside. But hopefully this helps you get a really good idea on how to manage your feudal contracts across all of the rights, the special contracts, and the individual influence of both feudal taxes and levies, as well as just some other kind of nice little quick tips. If you have any other questions about feudal contracts or you need some help with managing your vassals, don't forget to check out that video I created on managing vassals. But as always, please feel free to leave a comment below and ask questions. I'm more than happy to help out as best as I can. Again, as always, thank you so much for watching here today. Have a good one and take care.